whatnot. In that capacity, one of the things I did was run an incubator up in Sunnyvale that was owned by Mitsubishi, which actually funded a lot of the startups back in the 1990s that invented the fundamental technologies for the smartphones of today. And we had some IPOs coming out of that, which enabled me to retire in 2000. And I've been an investor ever since, and a consultant. Was on the board of Razorfish, if you guys know that company. I've been involved in a couple of large exits, and also spent some time in private equity, involved in a couple of fairly sizable transactions there. And along the way, I've picked up a concept that marketing in an entrepreneurial company, a startup, is very, very different than product marketing in any old company, either big or small, that is an already established company. And what this lecture is about is not what is marketing, but kind of what is the difference between entrepreneurial marketing and any old marketing. And another thing we're going to talk about is within that difference, there are major differences in how you define your market, how you position your product for sustainable competitive advantage, how you go about entering the market, and in entering the market, how to tell whether time to market is more or less important than getting the product absolutely right and the product market fit absolutely right. And finally, if we have time, I'm going to talk about why is influencer marketing and early reference account marketing so much more important in a startup than it is in generalized product marketing. And as JJ said, I'm going to take questions throughout this, but in order to signal them that you have a question, you need to raise your hand in the on the participants page. So you go to the bottom of your screen and you click where it says participants, and you'll see a pop-up that lists everybody who's logged on to the webinar. And then there's a click button at the bottom of that list that says raise hand. Or else if you click your name sometimes, or click the icons on the right of your name, it should have a little menu that set a little drop-down menu, and one of the choices will be raise hand. And when you raise your hand, JJ will see that that you're trying to ask a question, and he'll call on you.
So
all right,
we'll leave the raise hand till the end. But if they have a question, just type it in the Q&A section, and then at the end we'll open it up so they can do audio questions. So that way we're not interrupting you throughout. So they can ask typed questions, and then we'll let you know when we see those.
Super. All right, here we go.
All right.
So what are kind of the dimensions of entrepreneurial marketing? What are the key areas that are different about marketing in a startup versus any old marketing? I guess the most important difference is that you have a proactive orientation, which means you have a bias toward doing something instead of studying it. Get out and get something going. Activity is not better than research, but activity, in fact, is usually a form of research because you're starting from nothing. And so everything that you do, the feedback that you get from it is teaching you something. So it's more important to be doing things than it is to be watching how other people did them to some extent. Second is you're opportunity driven. That means you may have made a plan to do, to sell it to a certain group of customers, what you're making. But in the course of that, you discover that you have a better product market fit with another group of customers that you didn't even think in the beginning would be worth talking to. But if, boy, that's an opportunity, jump on it. So there's a lot of pivoting, okay, now it doesn't mean that you have a lack of focus, but it means you're always assessing priorities and assessing whether you should pivot or you should keep pursuing the route that you're going on. Third thing is customer focus. In a big company, you're focused on two things. One, of course, is your customers, but the other is the interior way that business gets done inside your company. Who do you have to get approval from? Who do you have to impress? Who do you have to make a presentation to just to get approval to go respond to customer opportunities, or to be proactive, or to change the procedure, or whatever change you have to make. But in an entrepreneurial company, you just go do stuff, right? It's all very quick decision making. And that is the biggest thing that you have going for you in an entrepreneurial company, is that you can focus on the customers and you can move a lot faster than bigger companies, even though the bigger companies have more resources than you have. Innovation focus. Big companies have big legacy things, big giant flywheels full of the way we've always done it. Entrepreneurial companies are inventing the way they're going to always do it. So everything you do, in effect, is an innovation. You have to create all the support systems. You have to create everything, right? And that means, in addition, because you have limited resources to create all this stuff, you have to leverage resources that you don't control. Resource leveraging basically is a matter of getting other people to do the stuff that you need done for you without costing you anything. And it's a trick, but the idea is to kind of make them see that it's to their advantage to do what you need to have done. And then convincing them basically to buy your vision and to buy into the idea that if they throw in with you and help you, that they get their vision to come true. Another very important aspect of entrepreneurial marketing that's different than any old marketing is the degree of risk that you have to deal with when you are proactive, when you chase an opportunity, when you innovate. In a big company, it's huge. So if you make a mistake, I mean, it might be bad for like your personal career, but it won't be necessarily noticeable in the grand scale of a Procter and Gamble, or, or something like that, or an Apple, But when you are starting up, everything you do, in effect, there is a certain degree to which it's putting the whole company at risk. And so it's very, very important to understand how risky things are going to be and whether you have the ability to manage the risk by some means, maybe, pivoting or plan B of some sort. But you have to make sure that don't take risks, but make sure you understand how to manage them. Make sure you understand what your options are in case something goes wrong. And finally, and another very, very important aspect, if you are working inside of, say, Procter and Gamble or an Apple or a Google, what you do and how well this product does that you're trying to launch and sell and turn viral. Unless it's an extremely huge project that is worth trillions of dollars, you're not going to affect independently the valuation of Apple. Or, it's so big that no matter how well you do, you'll almost never move that needle. But in an entrepreneurial startup where you are the whole company, the product, it exists to launch a particular product or service. What you do in product marketing is going to directly determine the whole valuation of the firm. So you've got a lot more personal leverage on your own reward than you do in a bigger company. And that means that you need to have everyone in the firm that you're starting, even if it's only 3 or 4 people, everybody has to be pretty aligned on what the priorities are when you do change focus, make a pivot, do something proactive, leverage resources, risk vulnerability management. You've got to have consensus in the firm, but it's a much faster process to reach that consensus than it is in an Apple. So any questions on this?
Yeah,
Okay.
there is one question, Howard. I'll read
Yeah.
it for you. It says, you mentioned influencer marketing is important. How does one get in touch with them? YouTube is something of them. How does one get in touch with celebrities for endorsement?
One, remember I talked about resource leveraging. Think of 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, right? If I want to get Kevin Bacon, I know other people. They know other people. Work your connections, right? Talk to them. You can get in if you're persistent and you're proactive, and you're good at getting people to align with your message. Another way, if you have enough money to hire a marketing company that specializes in representing and or matching you with influencers, then you can work with a company like that. And many of them themselves are startups and will work deals with you. You can get people, if you don't have money, you may be able to talk them into taking stock options. You have to be creative in how you get people aligned with you so that they'll help you. But at any rate, there are various ways. And thirdly, often the best way to do this is not to go and use a celebrity. Often the best way to do this is to go and collect a group of people that collectively, if you look at their reach or their fan out, they have together as a group the same number of followers as Kim Kardashian, but they are covering each of them some particular portion or aspect or demographic subgroup or psychographic subgroup of the total group that you want to reach, and paying like 20 of them to cover what Kim Kardashian covers probably costs you about a 50th or so of what it costs you to actually hire Kim Kardashian. And there are firms that will help you do that. And again, most of them are startups, and they can be flexible about taking payment if you can convince them that what you're doing or throwing in with you is to their benefit as much as it is to yours. Does that answer your question? Good. Let's go on. Now, marketing in a startup is like a 3-dimensional chess game a little bit. And the reason that it's a 3-dimensional chess game is that everything that you do affects more than the specific thing that you're doing it to. It has impacts on other things. And for example, when you decide to sell your product in conjunction with a strategic partner who's a lot bigger than you are, like for example, I'm building my business is to build a piece of software or a piece of hardware that is a component of a bigger system. One of our portfolio companies in our fund is Capillary Biotechnology or Biomedical, and they make the needles that attach to insulin pumps to pump, to actually bring the insulin out of the pump and release it underneath your skin. And also the tube that connects the insulin to the pump and the connector that connects the insulin to the pump. That's all called an infusion set. So their natural marketing partners are insulin pump companies. And they're working with those companies as suppliers, or as they're a supplier to that company, and the company is their distribution channel. But that company is also a potential exit, because if that infusion set is sufficiently important to the success of their insulin pump, they may want to control the technology of Capillary. And so every distribution deal they make is also the beginning of a potential exit negotiation, right? And so those type of things have to be taken into consideration when you're doing marketing. Again, because everything you do is directly impacting the valuation of the whole firm that you're part of or that you're founding. So let's look at what you are actually marketing and who you're marketing it to. Okay, every time you're marketing a product or a service, you market it to, you're marketing actually the product or service that you're marketing, but you're also marketing the value of the equity in your company that's making this product or providing this service. And you're also marketing the image of your company, meaning, which is in turn helping the value of the equity. But you're marketing the image of the company to people that have nothing to do with buying the product. Okay, for example, you're marketing the image of your company to investors because, now that you're getting traction in the field with your product, your valuation is going up, so the equity is worth more, right? So you're marketing the value of your company to all of your channel partners and your supply chain and your strategic allies, because you need them to do stuff for you basically for free or for a piece of the equity instead of for cash. That means that you're marketing not only the product that you want them to be involved with or the service, but again, the value of your equity and the value of your whole company and the image of your whole company, not just the product itself, the company. And the biggest lesson that you learn from this is that when you are involved in marketing a product, you are affecting the equity of the company and the value of the company, because the company only is doing one thing, which is that product or that service, right? That's why you yourself are determining how much you're going to be worth, if this thing goes and is successful and gets acquired, right? everything you do is positioning, is almost part of the negotiation for the exit. Finally, in order to do this, you have to recruit employees and contractors to help you build the product and service. They're like part of your supply chain, and they're going to be your colleagues. And you've got to market the image to them, because the key resource that you have to do anything is your team, and people that your team can suck in or slipstream in behind them, right? It's very different than in a big company, where if you need some help, you go to some other department, right? And the people are already on the team, in effect. They're just not working with you at the moment. It's a totally different kind of negotiation. And to do that, you have to be committed personally to the company, and you have to be good at talking about how good your company is, not just the product, because that's who the employee or potential employee that you're trying to convince to come on board, that's why they're going to come on board. I mean, partially they'll come on board because they're a good friend of yours from graduate school or something. But this is a big life decision for them, right? Because they're probably taking, a considerable cut in cash compensation to throw in with you in return for like future stock options, And the only reason they do that is they think that they are going to have a personal influence on how much those options are worth when they get there. So all this is connected, and it's like it's a three-level chess game, right? On 6 dimensions: the customers, the influencers that you're trying to recruit, the investors that you're trying to get to help fund your company, all of the supply chain and channel partners and strategic allies, both little companies and huge companies, and all the employees in the company that you're trying to recruit and that you have to work with once you do recruit them, that may become colleagues. Any questions on this?
There is a question, yes. One says, even for employees also are mentioning to give them stock options, but eventually when you wear investor hat, you ask how much equity you have given. It is a double-edged sword. Not
You're
so
correct.
easy.
And so is chess. It happens exactly the same way.
Yeah.
You've got a position and you've got a critical move to make. And if you move one way, you've got an attack, but you're leaving yourself open to a counterattack. If you move the other way, you're defending, but now you're giving the opponent the initiative.
All right,
everything is like that for balance. You're totally correct. It is a two-edged sword. That's why assessment of risk and risk management is very important. Because if you lose your balance, there has to be a net underneath on that sword.
Yep. So there's another question. You mentioned several times that give stock options to people who help you, etc. Be creative, but when it comes to the investors round, they do not like equity is shared with others. It's quite contrary of what you said.
The issue is, what percentage of the company are you going to reserve for options? And have you told the investors that up front? Because a sophisticated investor actually is going to require you to have a certain amount of the equity reserved for options, because they know all of what I'm telling you. And they know that the company can't function if it has to pay cash for every single thing that it's doing, because there's not enough cash. There's never enough.
In the early stages, exactly, yeah.
So a sophisticated investor is expecting you to give some part, roughly 15% usually of the company, to potential future employees, to potential strategic allies. You know, there's many uses for stock if the company is going well. And the better you do, the better it works. So that's one of the reasons why getting the ball rolling quickly and getting out there and being in the market is very, very important, because the faster you can get into the market, the faster you can learn what you have to do to make this thing go viral. And as soon as it goes viral, your stock ends up being worth a lot more, which means that you have to get less of the company away to get the same amount of stuff done for free. But not for free, but you know, for stock instead of cash. Okay. All right, next slide. Now, what do you need to define in order to sell or to start this whole process of sales and marketing rolling before you even begin to design it in terms of engineering? You don't, I mean, so many people start companies and they're all technical people and they have developed the technology, and now they're trying to figure out the answers to these questions, right? But they have, since they've never been involved in marketing, they have really no experience in how to do this. Okay, and they have two options. A technical team of founders faced with this situation has two options. They can learn how to do this, which is totally possible to do, but they need mentors to help teach them, which means they have to start recruiting an advisory board or even a governance board. And two, they can go and hire somebody who joins their team as a colleague and knows how to do this. And, you know, basically that way they can continue to stay more focused on the solving the technology. And there will be a separate group of people that ends up being built underneath this individual who deals with all of this. But even if they do that, the technical people have to know at least what is involved in doing this so they can tell whether it's being done right on their behalf or not being done right. So what are these things that you have to define with respect to the product or service that you are planning to sell in your company and build in your company? One is, who is the target customer? And you might think that would be pretty obvious, but sometimes it's not so obvious, because sometimes there's actually multiple choices for who the target customer could be. For example, this is the classic example. Let's say you invented the fax machine, or that's a bad example, but let's say you invented a marketplace, right? And you've got a SaaS service that you're going to put up, which is matching. Here's a good one. You're matching psychotherapists with potential patients or clients that need help, you know, personal counseling help. Now, the idea here is that the patients want there to be a large variety of psychotherapists, but the psychotherapists need there to be a large body of potential patients. So this is a chicken and egg situation. And the question is, which one of them are you going to collect your money from? Because whoever you're collecting your money from is the customer. But all of the other entities that you have to recruit into your game in order for the people that you're going to get money from to actually be willing to pay you, they are like customers. And you have to do a lot of the same things with them that you do with customers, even though they're not the actual target customer. So when you're setting up an ecosystem connected with bringing your product or service into existence, in that ecosystem, yes, there's one customer, but who are the who's the rest of the ecosystem that has to be present in order for that customer to be willing to pay you? And then what do you have to give them? What value do you have to offer all these other pieces of the ecosystem so that they'll agree to be part of your ecosystem? And normally that's like a rev share, or, you know, hiring them to do something. But sometimes it's just maybe it's so valuable to them to get into your marketplace, for example, so that they can get more clients, that they'll pay you something. Oh, that's interesting. You know, now I have 2 customers, but which one is the real customer? So you've got to understand the logic of not only who's your customer, but what are all the other things that have to be in existence in an ecosystem surrounding your product, and what type of relationship do you have to have with all those things, or people, or entities, to make that happen? In effect, to get the customer, and maybe some of those people also become customers. Now, once I have the whole ecosystem, or I understand what it all has to be, that whole ecosystem is what your customer, whoever it is buying. They're not just buying the exact product or service that you are selling. They're buying the whole experience of dealing with your product and service, much of which is provided by the rest of this ecosystem, not purely only by you. And the whole experience that the customer has of dealing with your product or service, plus its ecosystem, is called the complete product or service offering. What that offering is defining, that's exactly what we just talked about, defining the whole ecosystem and defining how or what transactions are happening among the members of the ecosystem and between those members and the customer that causes this whole thing to work properly. Those are the 2 real things that you need to define. And then all the rest of these things follow once you understand those 2 things. How the target customer is going to perceive the offering of not just your product, but the whole experience of dealing with you and the ecosystem. How are they going to perceive that in relation to what the competition is doing? That is called positioning. Is it giving them better quality? Is it cheaper? Is there something unique that they can only get from your ecosystem that all the alternative ways they have of solving their problem cannot provide? Right? All of that is positioning. And with the positioning comes a value proposition. A value proposition is, how is the customer going to benefit? The customer typically is either experiencing pain of some sort, or they want to have pleasure of some sort. All behavior in nature is the result of either avoiding pain or seeking pleasure. However much money they are willing to pay to make their pain go away or to get the pleasure that they want determines the size of the market, right? You don't determine the size of the market necessarily by going to a book or a research report. You know, that's what people are spending now, right? If you have a whole new way of looking at their pain or giving them their pleasure, that's so different that people are willing to spend more for it than they are for however they're solving their pain now or getting their pleasure now, then you just made the market bigger. There's the same number of potential customers, but because of your product and its unique position and its unique ecosystem or whatever, they're willing to spend twice as much per interaction. Then you just doubled the market. And that is value creation. So you have to understand and be able to quantify in dollars what is the customer pain or what is the customer's pleasure, and then show how what you are offering gives them that for less money. That is your value proposition, or increases the amount of, or decreases the pain more, or increases the pleasure more for the same money. That is a value proposition. And then, you know, once you know how much value the customer is getting, you know how to price. Most people think that price has, you figure out how much it costs you and you add some kind of margin on the top of it that pays for, you know, that is basically your profit. And you say, okay, that's how I'm going to price it. Prices have nothing to do with costs. Prices have to do with how much of the value that the customer is getting are they willing to pay back to you in order to get it. And normally that is no more than 25 to 30, maximum of 25 to 30% of the value that you're giving or that you're creating for them. They're certainly not going to pay you, for example, 100% of the value you're creating, because then they wouldn't have anything left. They get the, basically, they get whatever the pain is removed, or they get the pleasure, but they would have lost all of the pleasure because of the pain of paying all of its value back to the person who was giving it to them. And that's kind of like this, that's sort of what happens to drug addicts, if you think about it. So, it has to be a win-win. Any kind of business transaction has to be a win-win. Both sides have to gain something. And so typically research shows that customers are willing to pay maybe 25 to at absolute maximum of 30% of their pain, you know, of the value of releasing their pain in order to actually get the pain released. And finally, you have to understand how the customer goes shopping. How do they find out and end up executing the purchase of their pain relief? That is called a channel. That is how you get your service to them. And there are many, many ways of figuring that all out. And you can go directly. You can go through a retail operation like an Amazon or a brick and mortar store. You can go with influencers. You can go with distributors who then recruit or service large numbers of small, customized or small, highly personal, interactive outlets that bring your product or service to the customer. So each product or service has to have this figured out for it uniquely. Just because somebody else has used and was very successful, you know, working through Amazon does not necessarily mean that your specific business will be successful working through Amazon. So you have to really think about this, because part of it is determined by who else is in your ecosystem and what channels are they using. not just what you're using. Any questions on this?
So there are a few questions, Howard. I have a question. So so are you saying if my pain is $1,000, that, and then a new company is solving that pain, the maximum I would pay is $250 to $300 to solve my pain?
In most cases.
Okay, all right. So there's a bunch of questions. I think you've answered some of them. Some of them kind of, okay, I'll just say, the question is, what was iPhone's problem? It was not a pain or pleasure.
Meaning what was the pain or pleasure that was created for people that use the iPhone?
Yeah, when the iPhone was created, it was neither pain or pleasure. I guess that's what he's saying.
Okay. Think of it this way. First of all, there are two kinds of pain or pleasure. One was when the iPhone was introduced, in order to deal with anything other than a voice phone call and maybe text messaging, you had to have another device besides the phone in your other pocket that was called a PDA, a personal digital assistant, or lug a laptop computer around. And in those days, laptop computers were a lot bigger and heavier than they are now. In either way, you were paying effectively double the money than you did if you had all that functionality integrated right into the phone. And also inconvenience, sometimes even personal injury in the case of, like, if you're more kind of limited in your ability to pick up a large object and throw it into the overhead bin, or if you're trying to use it in a cramped airline seat, et cetera, you're not, there was a lot of pain associated with the fact that you had multiple devices to do these things. Secondly, it was more fun. It was exploratory. It was a whole new world. So there was a curiosity and fun element to it that created pleasure. Okay. And thirdly, it made possible all sorts of new functionality to do a lot of things that solve pain, other than just the pain of specifically making the phone call. It created a whole new way to run computer applications without a computer, without a laptop computer as the client device. And that allowed all sorts of interesting applications. So it was a whole new world. It enabled a whole new set of ways to make money doing completely brand new things, right? It created a whole ecosystem. And therefore, people were willing to pay a lot of money to get a hold of it. And the last thing was they had a very clever channel strategy when they launched it. You may not, since it was like 20 years ago, people don't entirely remember this. But at the beginning, and for I think the first 3 or 4 years that it was on sale, you could only buy it from AT&T Wireless. Right? So they deliberately made it somewhat scarce. And so it had value because of supply and demand, right? And not only did Apple benefit from that, but AT&T benefited from that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, it was part of it came from creating a whole new ecosystem, and therefore lots of potential future increased value that people could see. Part of it came from just being fun, and part of it came from solving pain. Next question. Hello?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry. What if sales cycle is very low, especially utilities? We have tremendous value, but sales is too slow. What are your thoughts to increase client revenue?
Well, we can talk, we'll talk about that later. Can I hold that one for later? Because
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
One more here, two more here. I'm sorry. Yeah, iPhone was not 20 years. Yeah, it's true. It's 2007. So it's about 13 years. Yeah. The next question we have is, before iPhone, there was Palm Pilot, Newton, BlackBerry, Nokia. iPhone was the next better iteration. Well, I agree with you, HD, but I think what Howard is saying, it's not even better. It created a whole new world. Right, Howard?
So point out that the iPhone, it is 20 years. And the reason I can say it's 20 years is that I was involved in it. What the iPhone is and the whole ecosystem that it has and the new markets that it created was all done in Japan 6 years before the iPhone by effectively NTT Docomo and Mitsubishi with the iMode phone. And if you go back and look at the iMode phone that was released it was released even before 2000, actually. It did in Japanese functionally, not artistically and not with as much verve, but just in terms of raw functions that it could do. It did everything that the initial iPhones did. It made calls, right? But it had a graphical icon-based interface that was a touch screen. It had no physical keyboard. And it was color, wasn't black and white. It worked with the internet. It had messaging and the internet. You could go to websites and run apps that were downloaded. Because the whole operating system of the phone was developed in Java, you could build applets and download them, and then they would become part of the phone's browser, just like they did on personal computers, which, by the way, is the only embedded application for Java where Sun Micro / Oracle ever granted such a license was for this phone and its successors. And it did what the iPhone does. And in fact, it is where Steve Jobs got the idea for the iPhone. Because prior to that, he had built another thing that he was going to eventually put a phone in called the Newton. Anybody remember the Newton? Yeah, wouldn't have worked, right? Too big. So that was so the whole problem was solved in Japan, and the whole ecosystem was created in Japan before it ever came to the United States with the iPhone.
You can hear me clearly, and also
Can we ask whoever that is?
So please let me know in the chat box.
Hello?
Thanks to others, please.
Yeah, sorry.
I
Let's see, questions. Okay, you answered that one. So Martha has a question. How do you compare your company with others without sounding fake or other?
How do you compare your company with others without sounding fake? Basically, you show what is unique about your company. There's nothing wrong with the other companies, but we have a unique insight into what your problem is, Mr. Customer. And we deliver that uniqueness. And none of the other people do that. It's not fake, and you have to be able to back it up. You really have to be able to show them an MVP, a minimum viable product, that at least has enough function to make them believe that you can do this unique thing. Yes. But you don't say, oh, we're so much better than everybody. No, everybody is good. We're different. And the difference has some incremental value that it's worth it for you to give some part of that value to us. Okay, why don't we go on and maybe we can pick up any more questions on this at the end. Okay. Now, I talked about in the beginning a bias for action, like proactive bias. And the idea is that you try to get out in the market as early as you can, even if the whole product or service is not perfected that you're trying to market. And the reason you do that is that by definition, you're starting from nothing. So by definition, there's a lot that you don't know and that you have to learn. And the objective is to learn it on the job, OJT, right? On the job training. Get out into the market rather than theorizing about what might be necessary, and let the market tell you what you need to do, to what kind of ecosystem needs to be there, you know, what type of changes in the feature or function of the product that you're designing that you may have to make, you know. Or let's say you are doing a B2B platform for some really complex enterprise IT. If you have a series of very big customers, you need to figure out, and each of those customers, your technology is adapted to integrate with all their existing systems in some unique way for each customer. And you have to do a lot of engineering for each customer. Somehow you have to abstract out of that how much of that uniqueness for each customer is actually not unique, how much of it is actually common across all those customers, versus how much is the adaptation, the customization, right? The training, the technical support, how much of that is unique and what part of it is common. Because the part that's common is your product. Everything else is a system integration service. And one thing we know about systems integration services is that they don't capitalize very well compared to products, okay, or other types of services that are more cookie cutter. And the reason they don't capitalize is that they don't scale well. If it takes a lot of very skilled employees or contractors to do all that customization, and you can't sell the product, the core product with the common features for all customers without the customization, then you cannot grow any faster than you can add those trained people, either through strategic relationships, channel relationships, or hiring them. And therefore, you can't grow virally. You can only grow as fast as you can add these people, which is usually linearly. So since you can't grow exponentially, you cannot get, there's no leverage point to that business, and therefore it's harder to find people to invest in it. So you have to understand whether there are phenomena like that involved in your business, right? And you have to understand that as fast as you can, because you've got to put the rest of your ecosystem together. And you have to do that before potential competitors do that, et cetera, et cetera. You have to understand what your complete offering is going to be. So get your minimum viable product ready as fast as possible. it doesn't necessarily have to be a revenue generating product, but it does have to be something that is functional enough to interest the customer and stable enough to be put into field use by a customer as a beta. Maybe you don't charge them for that, but you may get a customer reference, you may get an influencer out of that. So through that, you understand what the complete offering is. And as you understand what the complete offering is, you can understand how to tweak the positioning of your product to emphasize the value proposition. And the value proposition is going to change the more you find out about how the customers are reacting to your MVP and positioning changes. And as you kind of converge on what kind of an ecosystem you have to set up, meaning what is your complete offering. Once you understand the value proposition, immediately you can start understanding how to change the pricing to maximize the amount of revenue you can get. And you also understand what channel strategy is best. You may start off, and I would say normally you start off doing this by direct sales. And the direct sales is typically done by the CEO and the CTO. But or the CTO and the chief revenue officer, the CEO and the chief revenue officer. But anyway, once you have done a few lead or beta level customers using the MVP, even for completely free, you'll find out from understanding the rest of the ecosystem, the rest of your complete offering, the price level, and the value proposition, you'll understand from all those things what your ultimate channel strategy has to be. And then you go back and you may find that some of the potential early customers turned out not to be the early customers, and someone else did. Maybe someone else in the ecosystem discovered that they need your product to help their business, so they become your channel partner, okay? And you drive this thing around this circle, and this whole circle is called probe and learn, okay? The idea is to go as fast around this circle as you can and make these changes as fast as you can and spend the least possible money that you can doing it, and do it all faster than any of the competition can do. And the big advantage that you have over a big company is that a big company cannot do this because they can't move fast enough and they can't be nimble enough. The big company will study effectively, do their best job of studying all this, and make the best estimate they can of what the result of it is, and then launch that, and then live with it for a while, even though they're finding out a lot of information about everything they did wrong when they launched it. They can't change it fast enough. It's going to take them 2 years to iterate the product offering to compensate. So big, because they're so big, even though they have a lot of resources, it's like, you know, trying to steer an aircraft carrier, right? You can go much faster. Your smallness and your agility is your advantage. So the probe and learn strategy is very, very important for startups. And in a bigger company, you would almost never use this strategy. Next. All right. JJ, when do you want to take a break here?
Up to you. You can take a break, or you can continue. Up to you.
When are we ending? Let's see. What's the end class?
We have it's the window is 9 to 11. So.
Okay. Why don't we take a break here? Because we're going to start.
All right, you want to
When
do a 5-minute break?
Yeah, 5-minute break, and when we come back, we'll open it for questions again,
Okay,
and then we'll,
sounds good. 5-minute break. We'll be back 16 after the hour.
right.
All right.
There we are.
So there's a couple questions. You want to answer them?
Go ahead.
Is it fair to say we have X times more value than the competition and half the price?
As long as you can back it up with an itemization of where that value is coming from.
Okay. What about if you what if you are linear for 4 to 5 years and then exponential, but good climate-wise?
I don't quite understand the question, I guess.
I don't
Could you
understand it
ask the
either.
person who?
I don't know who the person is. They're
Good.
anonymous, so I couldn't tell. So the next question.
Continuation of the first one, JJ. So the first is it always about money growing exponentially? What about climate and sustainability?
Oh, okay.
Okay. The problem with, and I believe that climate and sustainability are incredibly important. So first of all, because if we don't solve them, we're going to end up like the planet Venus, where the surface is hot enough to melt lead. And no question about it. The problem with benefits like that is that they are common benefits. Common benefits that nobody is willing to pay for because they're not experiencing enough pain yet. And by the time they experience the pain, it's too late to stop it. This type of thing in economics is called a tragedy of the commons. And people say, oh, private enterprise will solve that. Private enterprise will never solve a tragedy of the commons. Only a government intervention can solve a tragedy of the commons. Because anybody, it's like, if only everybody would cooperate and sacrifice a little bit, we could then solve this problem. But nobody wants to sacrifice a little bit, because if everybody is sacrificing and one person doesn't, that one person suddenly becomes more efficient economically and therefore dominates everything. Right? Everybody else is a sap. The smart ones, nice guys finish last, all that kind of stuff. But unfortunately in economics, it's often true. So, and then when one company doesn't, or one person doesn't, and they get a positive result economically from it, everybody else looks at them and says, oh, well, if they're doing this, why should I be stupid, right? And so you can't, so problems like that, where there's a generalized benefit to society, but you can't get an individual customer to pay anything, are called tragedies of the common. And that's why anybody who's engaged in a green business like that, they have to say, who is the customer? Very, very carefully. Because to get adoption, there has to be a direct benefit to individual customers, without regard almost to what other customers are doing. Okay. Because even if they don't do anything, it's different than a viral product with a networking effect. You may say, oh, well, why isn't this like, smartphones? Because now everybody can use everybody else's apps, and therefore there's a network effect and it goes viral. Doesn't work. Because each individual got a direct benefit from joining the network, which is they could do whatever they were doing with all the rest of the network. Here, whether they join the network of people who are helping the climate or not, they get a benefit. As long as everybody else is going to help the climate, they get a free ride. So there has to be something in the adoption of the product which directly benefits the customer more than just the benefit they get from the free ride of all the other people who joined it, even though they didn't, if that makes any sense. So you have to find that kind of customer, because that kind of customer is the only customer you can sell a green product to. So it has to do something. What you're doing to make it green has to have some other benefit, like it also makes them more efficient. It also increases their own profit, right? It makes them more money, or it reduces the cost of something that they're doing, and therefore makes them more money. And oh, by the way, it stops greenhouse gas emissions, right? That kind of thing. So that's my answer to that, is that you're dealing with the tragedy of the commons. Next question.
Okay, here we go. Are there any marketing companies which can focus on certain industry and knows about them in and out? Can you please name a few good ones? Cheaper for startup. They all say they generate leads. We need closers, not just generating leads.
So you're looking for an independent sales organization that knows a lot about a specific market, in effect, a vertical specific independent sales organization. The answer to the question depends on what the product is and what the vertical market is. So if I could ask the asker of that question to provide a little more information, because there is not a universal answer. The answer is quite specific to the market, the vertical market that you're selling into, because some vertical markets have organizations like that and some don't.
All right, well, we can move on, and then that will maybe we'll open it up to the audio at the end. That makes a little bit more sense.
Yes, okay. Now, we talked about defining the complete offering, meaning pull together, understand what is the ecosystem that has to be in place. What other types of functions besides just your product have to be in place in order to be able to give the end customer the full benefit of pain relief or pleasure generation. And again, what you want to do is either do a concept test or actually build an MVP and put it out in the market as early as possible in your process. Don't wait for the thing to be completely designed. Find a subset of all the functions that it does that at least, will convince the customer that you understand what their problem is. Even if you can't solve all of it right away, put it out there and then upgrade it in the field. You're only going to have it at a few customers. So you should be able to manage kind of modifying the product while it's being used by these customers to some extent. And use this probe and learn strategy, because it is a typical strength of startups to be able to react quickly. And again, what is a complete offering? You are fully addressing the customer's needs and wants, and including the entire system or experience that the customer has or interacts with when they buy your product, or when they use your product as a piece of something bigger, of a bigger system that they're buying. And what this entire experience or system includes is effectively the ecosystem of the product or of the service. It includes the channel. It includes the service and support for problems. It includes the app. It includes the network. It includes content, potentially. that's generating. And all these things are not necessarily things, and most of them, in fact, are clearly not things that your startup is going to do all by itself. It's going to be collaborating with other companies, established big companies and other startups to do this. Okay. Now, how do you balance time to market versus getting it right? How do you know whether it's more important to get out there as fast as possible, even if it's full of problems, or wait and make sure we solve certain problems before we try to go out into the market? With the probe and learn strategy, you can do both at the same time, right? You can put it out there in a very limited way, gather information, change things, go back, put it out again, gather even more information, change things, and you can incrementally get it right and be out in the market at the same time. There is a risk in that. The risk is that a competitor finds out, right? Or that it doesn't work so badly that you've damaged your image, right? And you fall flat on your face because you got it so wrong, right? Well, what if that happens? You do it under non-disclosure. You do it in stealth mode. You don't announce that you're doing it. You make everybody sign non-disclosure agreements, and it's all done quietly. And you don't make announcements until you have it stabilized enough and focused enough that it already is ready to start going viral by the time you publicize it. There is a saying that the best is the enemy of the good. In engineering, you try to do whatever is optimal, the best. But in business, you end up trying to do what's the first thing that works, meaning the first thing that meets certain success criteria is fine to do, even though if we worked on it more, we might do it better. And there are two reasons. One is that startup capital is finite, right? You have to know your funder's time horizon. How long do you have until you can exit and get them their money that they want to make, right? Until you get an IPO and get them their money that they want to make. Usually, capital is given in increments that give you between 1 to 2 years of runway. In other words, 1 to 2 years of spending for each capital injection. And because you're growing, the later capital injections are a lot bigger, but they're bigger because you're spending more because you grew. And therefore, they also, even these big injections of capital in a series like DEC, they also are only giving the companies that get those injections, a year or 2. So you only have a finite amount of capital, so you got to make it do the most with that money that you possibly can. So that's one reason why time to market is important. And the other is know your competition. Competition is not necessarily other startups trying to do what you're doing and create or join into the same ecosystem that you're creating or joining. Competition may be doing it in some completely different way, that doesn't solve 100% of the pain, but they already have relationships with customers. And they could, if you think about it, possibly duplicate what you're doing and just throw it out into their whole existing ecosystem, which may be a totally different ecosystem than the one you're building. And also, if somebody's really in pain, they're dealing with it somehow. There's always the competition of whatever the customer is doing now for pain relief. So you have to know your competition. And particularly, you have to know how fast your competition is capable of moving. And part of that is dependent on how much money the competition has or is raising. Because if they have more money, they may be able to move faster, or they may be in a more advanced state than you are. And that means you have to move faster. So know what your competition is doing. All those considerations go into the decision as to whether to work more on the product before putting it out, or put it out and then figure out what's wrong and then work on it. And every cycle around that probe and learn cycle, every time you go around that, you balance this. And because you know you're going to take more than one cycle, when you make your business plan and figure out how much money you need, plan for cycles. Don't assume everything works the first time you try it. Assume that it's going to take you 2 or 3 false starts. And each of those is going to cost some money before you get your revenue. And you may say, well, it'll make it harder to get funded. No, I think it'll make it easier to get funded. Because a really sophisticated venture capitalist sees lots of business plans where everything has to work right the first time. And they make people with plans like that change them to put in more money at the beginning to let them fail a couple of times first. Now, given that you know you have a product that depends on an ecosystem or partners or other people doing things that are necessary to complete the complete product offering, you have another decision to make, which also is typically not made in a bigger company. And that is, what can I not do? I have limited resources. What are the things in this whole process of the complete offering? What are the things that have to be mine? What are so critical to the value generation that I want to be the one who controls them? And anything else you want to outsource or talk somebody else into doing, have a partner do it, buy it from some contractor, whatever. You only want to expend your own resources on what is going to build a sustainable competitive advantage for you against competition, and that maximally leverages the distinctive competence that your team has, that your team can do better than anyone else in the world, right? That is what distinctive competence is. It is your secret sauce. It's either some engineering thing, or maybe it's a sales thing, but whatever it is, you do it better. And if you can leverage that and you understand what is most critical in your business to be that your company has to do by itself, because there isn't an existing ecosystem partner who can do it, you can understand what to prioritize in the implementation of your complete offering. And if this is done right, it is the foundation for a successful exit. Before we ask questions on this, I'm going to show you a technique to figure this out. Okay. what is a competitive advantage? Again, it's something unique and valuable to customers other than a lower price. Pricing is never, ever. It is a competitive advantage in the short run, but it is not sustainable because anyone can copy it who's competing with you by just lowering their price. And if they're a lot bigger than you, they can lower their price pretty darn far and survive for a pretty long time. While your price, if you have to match it, you can't make money anymore. And therefore, you're dead. Okay. This happens, for example, in the oil business all the time, because the Saudis, whenever the frackers up in Canada and in the plains, whenever the frackers or the shale oil producers in Canada get too much of the market share, the Saudis just flood the market with oil, and the price of oil drops. And none of those guys can make money when the price of oil drops too far below $50 a barrel. So that's why the price of oil, you see these sudden kind of like price wars. It's the Saudis trying to push the frackers and the shale oil guys out of business. So price cannot be a sustainable competitive advantage. Now, the typical sources of competitive advantage are product features that signify value, features that maybe, create a big payoff for your customer that, nobody else has at the moment. Strong distribution channels, if they are exclusive and none of your competitors can use them because you've got them tied up in exclusive contracts, can be a competitive advantage. Better quality. Maybe you're just building the same thing as everybody else, but everybody else's is constantly breaking and yours is solid and that doesn't break. Why? Because that saves your customers money because they have to deal with all the broken stuff. And that costs them. Excellent service or support, right? Caterpillar tractor, right? Big, heavy construction equipment. Within 2 hours, if one breaks anywhere in the world, Caterpillar guarantees they will have someone on site to fix it. Very interesting. It's not that they build better tractors. It's that bulldozers break all the time and they can fix them faster. And time is money when you're on a construction project. And an excellent brand name, like just the value of a brand like Apple is worth some points on gross margin because people are just willing to pay more for Apple because it stands for something, right? And it's very difficult for anyone else to copy any of those things. The key thing that makes a sustainable product or competitive advantage sustainable is that it cannot be copied easily by the competition. And that is the basis for not necessarily an exit, but it is the basis for the valuation that you exit at. People who buy companies pay greatly for good, sustainable competitive advantage. So how do we build sustainable competitive advantage? Patents, copyrights, and trade secrets are obvious, right? Technology, right? And technology in, say, a manufactured product, it might not be the product. The product might be kind of low tech, but the quality of the product, for example, may be highly affected by the manufacturing process that you're doing. And the process technology is your competitive advantage, right? Whenever you define a product, it's not just the product that you patent, it's all the process technology that was involved in making the product really good. locations in the days before Amazon used to be repositories of sustainable competitive advantage, right? If you are if you're a retail clothing store chain and you have locations in all the best, shopping districts, and you have them either completely owned or you have them under long-term leases so that nobody else can get them, that used to be a sustainable competitive advantage. Not so much anymore. Service and support depth, we already talked about, the Caterpillar example. Organizational culture and know-how is a sustainable competitive advantage if it lets you move around the probe and learn cycle extremely fast. So just having a really good group of people, the team itself, in effect, is a potentially sustainable competitive advantage as long as you keep the team together. And exclusive relationships, anything like this in your ecosystem where you can tie up the rest of the ecosystem in some sort of a contract that prevents them from dealing with any competitors, is a tremendous sustainable competitive advantage. So exclusive relationships with suppliers of key components or with the channel that has a unique understanding of or access to the best customers can be a great sustainable competitive advantage as long as that exclusive relationship lasts. Now, here's the algorithm that I promised to tell you. And again, in a big company, all of what I've been talking about, you don't have to worry about for the most part, in most cases, because a lot of it already exists. Maybe not for your specific product, but your specific product might be close enough to be able to co-opt another product's ecosystem that the big company is already built up, or to maybe co-opt 80% of the ecosystem and you only have to invent 20% of it. But when you're a startup, you have to do all this from scratch. So again, and a lot of this again is the question of how do I get around my probe and learn cycle fastest, and how do I focus my resources on the specific things that are going to best leverage my distinctive competence as a team versus building the sustainable competitive advantage as fast as we can. So if you think about that problem, you can make this kind of a chart. And in this chart, the horizontal axis at the bottom is telling you it's showing how much things are going to leverage your distinctive competence, right? So for example, if I am a bunch of software programmers and my distinctive competence is writing code, but I need the hardware to write the code from, I have a choice of buying that hardware out, partnering with someone else who owns the hardware, and just putting my software on it as a co-sale, and then my third option is go into the hardware business. But going into the hardware business is kind of dumb because I'm wrapping a bunch of extra cost and risk around my sustainable or my distinctive competence, and at a lower margin rate than if I didn't have to actually buy or build and sell the hardware. So, why should I put more money into something that's more risky and has a much lower gross margin? I'd much rather give that to someone else. So low leverage of distinctive competence is like that. It says, this is something I need in my ecosystem, but I am not the best person in the world to go figuring out how to make that and sell it and whatever else I have to do. The vertical axis on this chart is how valuable is this thing in the ecosystem for establishing my sustainable competitive advantage, right? How critical is this, right? So that's an axis of how important it is for it to be in the ecosystem. And the horizontal axis is an axis of how easy is it for me to make that happen by myself versus using some outside resource and leveraging my resource. So clearly, if you look at the upper right-hand quadrant of this chart, that section is a combination of two things. It's something that is very high value for my sustainable competitive advantage. And I have a high confidence in the ability of my team with my resources and relationships to create whatever that is. Okay. Those are core things that I absolutely have to do by myself inside of my business. I don't want a strategic partner or a channel doing that for me, or a vendor, a supplier. I have to do it myself. So those are core. So I insource that. If necessary, I even hire more people to do that with my financing, with my money and the money of my investors. I invested in that. And I keep investing in it because I have to make sure that these are my core competencies, and they are the heart of my competitive advantage, and I have to keep them sustainable. So I throw a lot of R&D in my business plan into those areas. Okay, now let's look at the upper left-hand quadrant where it says core leverage. These are things that I need to create my sustainable competitive advantage, but unfortunately, I have a low competence in my team and with my resources that I already have. I don't have much competence in creating them or making them happen. These are things that I need either one of two things. I would rather find a strategic partner to co-develop them. Okay, often this is a bigger company than me. And often these things are not technical. They are distributional, usually, for a startup. Like, I need a sales force, right? The question that was asked earlier. Where do I get a sales force that understands my vertical market, right? Look at what companies are already selling things into that market. Look at your product or service and see if you can figure out whether, if these big companies could sell your product along with whatever they're already selling into that channel, that there would be synergistic effects that would make you both more money than if you tried to compete with each other, or if you tried to remain separate from each other. And if you can make that argument, and you can make a really good argument and back it up with facts, you should try to go into that company and see if you can get them to agree to sell that product for you, because they have the sales force you're looking for in that vertical market. And you have to show them why that will make more money for them, that somehow that will actually help them sell more, not only of your product, but more of the other products that they're already selling into that market, because they enable the customers to use more, say, of those products, right? or they work together with those products to make the customers able to enter new markets themselves and make more money at a lower risk or lower cost. Okay, so these things we eat. And the other example, if we cannot find such a channel, then we have to make it, because we need this. This is high value for establishing our sustainable competitive advantage. And if we can't partner with somebody to do it, then we have to create a new internal distinctive competence inside of our startup that we don't already have. And we have to allocate some of our investors' money, some of our venture capital, to create that out of nothing. And that's really hard to do, but it sometimes is the only alternative. And again, once we create it, it then becomes core. It moves from the left upper corner to the right upper corner, because once we've created it, it is in-sourced. And then we have to continuously allocate R&D to it in our plan to make sure it stays competitive. And normally the way you do this is you recruit a very key employee who knows how to build it, because they've already done that at another company very successfully. And they cost money. And you have to give them stock and so forth, or options. Now let's look at the lower half of this diagram. Okay. Non-core things are things that, first of all, I have to have them, but they're kind of things you have to have because everybody has them. They don't add any value, but they're necessary. Okay, like I have to be able to advertise. Okay, but I have no distinctive competence in them. I don't have an advertising department. Nobody in my team knows how. You know, luckily for me, there usually are experts in those things that you can hire. And possibly you may be able to hire and pay stock or options instead of cash. Okay, or it may be that my channel knows how to do that, and I give them more of a discount when they buy from me to compensate them for the cost of doing that function for me. So that determines, for example, my discounted price to distributors or to, you know, dealers or to systems integrators or value-added resellers. Those are non-core things. Always outsource those or work with the channel to do those, okay? Finally, in the lower right-hand quadrant are things that are kind of unusual. I have a high degree of distinctive competence at doing whatever this is, but it has a low value for establishing my sustainable competitive advantage, again, because everyone else has it, okay? Or it is a necessary precondition. Okay, now a classic example of this is things that you put out, like if you're developing an app, this would be code that the customer has to have in their IT environment, that in order to access your server, or an interface to code that they have in their environment that needs to access your server. Open source it, give it away. Don't charge money for it. You have to write it really well, right? It's worth allocating your distinctive competence to it. But if it's not there, nobody is going to be able to access the thing that you really want to sell, which is, for example, your database server or your AI or you know, whatever, your marketplace, whatever you have up in the cloud that you're really making money on, right? But it somehow has to talk to SAP or Oracle or what have you in the enterprise that you're selling to. Put the interface that has to be installed in the customer's IT environment, give it away. And not only give it away, but let's say that there are skilled, like a value-added reseller has to do that for you, because they're also the ones that are providing all the technical support and the customization. Let everybody have it at no cost, and instantly it becomes much easier for you to recruit more value-added resellers, because they don't have to figure out how to do this by themselves. You just made it, you just overcame a big sales objection or recruiting objection for value-added resellers to join your cause, right? Another thing you can do is co-develop this with a strategic partner, right? So that your own resources are not tied up completely in it. Okay, again, with one of the VARs, or, you know, and then you pay them something or give them a little stock in your company, and you have their programmers develop these interfaces, right? So you don't ever want to do that. You don't want to ever expect to make money from doing things like that, that fall into this non-core leverage quadrant. But you have to do them. You just don't expect to make any money. They're like prerequisites for you to make money from the thing that you really want to do, where your real expertise is. Okay, I'm going to stop here. I know I ran over, but we're going to leave it for questions now, because this is sort of the heart of the patient.
All right, thank you, Howard. So there's a couple, one question, I guess. Well, no, it was more of a comment, I guess. And that is, why do you think Quibi failed? This is the company that was co-founded by Meg Whitman,
Right.
where they received $2 billion in startup capital.
Right. I would, I could be flip and say it failed because of Meg Whitman. I'd even be right, you know. I think what they did is because of Meg Whitman, not because she's bad, but because they had such a stellar team in theory, they had all these big name Silicon Valley people attached to it. It was too easy for them to raise money. They got so big so fast inside their company got so bureaucratically big and fast that it could not execute this probe and learn thing. And so they just couldn't achieve, you know, they couldn't figure out, they couldn't adapt fast enough to figure out how to optimize down on, you know, the efficient way to isolate their what they were trying to do and optimize it by that method. And they spent a lot of time internally considering like how to do things before doing them. That is my personal belief. I have no idea if I'm right, but that's based on what I have heard, I would say.
Maybe too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah, or too much candy in the chocolate, you know, too much candy in the candy jar.
Yeah, too much candy in the candy jar too. All right. Okay, we'll open it up for anyone who would like to ask a question via live audio. So all you have to do is raise your hand and I will bring you in.
Right.
And here's Amit. Here we go.
How are you?
Hey, Amit. Go ahead.
Hey, Howard. This is pretty good. Thanks, JJ. This is pretty good. What you guys are doing, it's very helpful to people like me. Okay. So first, my thanks to you guys taking time out and helping us with this all information. This is everything is so good. So let me ask one question. I think I asked, and you mentioned that you will hold up that question. What if sales cycles is very slow? I mean, it's not very slow, and I'm finding some ways out in Waterside already how to make it faster, circumvent the process
Right.
by channel partner and all those things. But let's say if it's very slow, we have tremendous value, but sales is too slow. What do you recommend? Like, because just because it's slow, we cannot give up, right? We have find out like in 5 years working hard and finding what are the gaps in the market. We have something. Clients love it when we give demos, right? They just say, oh, timing is not right, pandemic, let pandemic pass over, oh, budget cycle, all this, but they all love it. Or they are under some other contract which will expire in 1 year, 2 year, whatever, right? But now we have a minimum
Mhm.
level product. We are with 2 customers. How do we scale up? How do we get more clients? And of
Let
course,
me ask you this. Can I ask you a couple questions?
sure.
One is like, what is the product? Can you give me like a one sentence description of this product?
Sure. So Trackle is it's a next generation cloud and mobile based water loss tracking and compliance management platform.
Right, water loss compliance and tracking platform. Good. And when you sell it, are you selling it upfront for, I mean, how much does it cost someone to get into the use of this product? Is it an expensive product that costs over $50,000, say, or is it something you can rent for, less than $100 a month?
Yeah, it's cheap. Like it's not like too expensive. It's a B2B, right? It's a B2B. It's not
Right.
a, it's B2B to C, but our buyers are utilities, right? So they pay us. So it
Yes.
goes based on number of connections. So depending upon how many connections they have, but we have minimum of 15,000 setup or 10,000, 15,000 setup one time and then annual support.
Okay. And do you have any idea, like water companies come in different sizes,
Mm-hmm.
right? Small ones and big ones.
Right, right.
How big does a company have to be to earn back in terms of the dollar value of the pain relief that they get or extra revenue that they get from using your product or service? How long does it take them to pay back in those savings that entry cost of $15,000?
Right, right. Probably like I would say 2 months, 3 months, that kind of a time frame.
But what size of the agency is going to have enough pain to pay it back that quickly? In other words, small agencies are going to take longer because they don't earn as much money per month.
Right.
There's got to be some minimum size agency that can experience the pain relief
Mm-hmm.
at a high enough so that the payoff of your initial entry fee is quick like that.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I
And
have not calculated that.
you need to calculate that because that could be one problem.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There are also big agencies are very bureaucratic, and there are many people involved in making a decision to do anything. Right. So when you go to pitch, how many people are typically in the room?
Yeah, it depends. Depends upon the size of the utility, and sometimes you have multiple demos. So I would say I have given demo when I went to Irvine Range Water District. We have like 10 people in the room.
So 10 people are typically in the room.
Yeah.
But have you noticed that when you're talking to a bigger water agency, there's more people than when you talk to smaller ones?
Correct. That's right. Anywhere from two to three to like 10, 15. Yeah.
Okay, so the fewer people that are in the room, it is often, not always, but it may be an indicator of how many people have to agree in
Yeah.
order to go to do something, right? So you have a trade-off. One is the smaller agencies have fewer decision makers, so the sales process is easier,
Mm-hmm.
but they're small to earn money fast enough from deploying your product to
Mm-hmm.
pay back the initial minimum installation cost.
Mm-hmm.
The bigger agencies can easily pay back the minimum installation cost, but the decision-making process is too complicated and therefore too lengthy.
Yeah.
Somewhere between those is a group of agencies that's just right,
Mm-hmm.
not too big, small,
Yeah.
not too complicated, but not too small,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
I think you need to look into that. Like, look, kind of try to figure out whether there is, in other words, indicators that you can use to pre-screen all of the potential customers and guess which ones are likely to fit into that zone and just start calling on them.
Yeah. And we have a
That's
strong, yeah, that's right. And we kind of figured that out by calling 200 districts in last 6 months, but everybody is like keeping fingers crossed and waiting this pandemic to go over. That's why our sales cycle are even delayed 6 months right now, but we are looking forward for January, February next year. Yeah. So we have 25 very strong leads. Let's see, let's hope.
Well, now the other thing is that what's the chief reason that they say they can't move? If it's only, you say it's only a $15,000 charge, and then the minute that they start paying month by month, they're going to start saving more than they pay each month.
Correct.
Yep. And are these agencies all required to disclose their financial condition to the public?
Yes, public. They are mainly public government, so everything is on internet.
All right. So have you tried looking at their financial condition and seeing whether they're healthy or not financially?
No, I haven't.
First of all, you should take the ones that are in your pipeline
Mm-hmm.
and scan that, because if they're not financially healthy because of the COVID or whatever, if they're not financially healthy, they're not going to make any decision to do anything,
Mm-hmm.
because all their decision making is going into how to increase their financial health, and they don't want to spend anything right now. They don't want to spend their employees' time even thinking about doing something different. They want to just cut costs because it's hard for them to raise rates.
Yeah.
Right? So first, prioritize the ones that are in the best financial shape.
Okay. It's a great idea.
Yeah, so try to do that. And then the other thing is, I think your original question had to do with, hire a specialized sales force that's more effective than I myself can be? Yes, if you can find somebody else like who already sells things to the water agencies and they're still buying things from them, even though they're not buying from you. So somebody that sells process control equipment, somebody that sells field repair equipment, somebody that sells water meters. I know you do. I believe you sell water meters, right? Go to a competing water meter company that doesn't have your technology. And maybe you have to spend some engineering time adapting your technology so that it works with their meters, right? But your real value is in the IP that detects the leaks or forecasts them, or checks the signatures of the water using equipment to see whether, there's leaks in them,
Yeah.
right? The digital signal processing, all of that is your real value. I mean, maybe you shouldn't even be building hardware, right? Look at this diagram, for example.
Yeah.
Maybe what you want to do with hardware, maybe the whole hardware piece of your business is over here on the left side of top corner instead of the right side top corner,
Mhm.
right? And by trading that business for better channel, it might be worth it.
Right.
So think out of the box a little bit on how you can reconfigure your business
Sure.
to,
So,
maybe
so-
work better with stuff that they already have the installed base in there,
sure, definitely. And
And you already, yeah, I think you already did that, if I'm
Mhm.
not mistaken, right?
yeah, that's right. So in terms of marketing company, right, there are so many of those right now. They all reach out, hey, we can generate leads and stuff. We don't need generating leads. It's simple. So we need closers. So do you have any recommendation for any company which is good and knows about this business and help us close?
Yeah, yeah, all those people that I said, but
Okay.
go to that has the best closers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're in the industry. You must know
Yeah.
who the best salesmen in the industry are of water meters.
Yeah. No, I was talking about like marketing companies, not these. These ones I'm already trying, but I thought like some standard marketing companies.
Ah, okay. Closing is not a marketing function.
Okay.
Closing is a sales function.
All right.
Okay.
No, you were,
Pointing the-
Howard, you were talking about the IDS, independent sales organizations.
Right. Marketing is all about pulling everything together so that in the end, the closers are focused on the most closable things.
Mhm.
It's marketing all about prioritizing the time of the closers or the resources of the closers.
Target
their-
clients.
Right.
Yeah.
In
Got it.
other, a lot of marketing is about focus.
Focus. Right.
But
I think
not-
marketing is more important. Like as you said, big companies. It's different than entrepreneurial marketing. Like this is totally different.
Right.
Okay, so that's great. Any last words on any investment guidance? Anybody, and some target investors, because I'm trying to reach out. I reach out to Mr. JJ and other words. I'm working with them, but any other ones?
I would continue. I think you need to find investors that have invested in other water technology companies.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Now, I think that here in Southern California, I don't think we have investors like that. I could be wrong, but I don't know. Okay. But I do know that I have seen a number of people with hydro tech, water distribution tech and smart water management come through, and all of them have had trouble finding traction among the seed level investment community down here. So you may have to look out of area. I would look at investors that are located in places like Las Vegas or Phoenix or Tucson,
Okay.
because they have water problems. So they
Right.
have a lot of water technology being developed in the universities and by entrepreneurs down there. And they probably have some investor community that goes along with that.
Okay.
All right. Well,
But
Amit,
I
thank
think
you very
here,
much.
that's where I would kind of would look. I'd start looking out of area.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Great.
Thanks, Amit. Anyone else would like to ask any question to Howard? All right, going once, twice, 3 times. We do have a no. All right, let's see. Amit, you want to go again? Okay, no. Okay, I'll. All right, here we go. What do you have, Amit?
I'm good. I don't have anything.
Okay, yeah, you had your hand raised again. All right,
Oh,
thanks.
my mistake.
All right, well, thank you all very much for being here today. And Howard, that was absolutely amazing. A lot of great input, a lot of great information, things you don't usually hear anywhere else. So that was very, very valuable.
All of this information is taken from my course at UCI Business School that I teach in the graduate business degree program.
Yes, yes, I know. No, that's really great. Is it okay if you share your presentation so we can share it with attendees?
Sure. I think it's I'm glad to do it. I would ask that they not further reproduce. They have to agree to not further distribute it.
Okay, all right. We will ask them to do that. If you could just
Do
send
you
a
have
PDF copy.
As long as you have some kind of legally binding form that they sign, I'm glad to do it under that type of restriction.
Okay, all right. I will definitely let you know then. So,
Super.
all right. Thank you so much, Howard. I'll talk to you soon. Actually,
You're
I'm gonna call you right after this. I have a couple of questions for you. So,
Sure, absolutely. Bye-bye.
all right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Everyone. Thank you. Don't forget to come to the finals next week and the week after, around 3.
Absolutely. And
All right.
am I judging that? I am. Right?
Everybody's
Yeah.
judging. Next week is everyone.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Talk soon. Bye-bye.